Hello and welcome back to the Security Conversations podcast. My guest for this conversation needs no introduction. The OG Apple O-Day guy, the OG car hacker, the OG Charlie Miller. Welcome to the show. How are
Great.
you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Why did it take so long for you to come on the show? I feel like this is way overdue.
Yeah, I listen to your podcast, believe it or not, and I've wanted to come on for a while, but it finally worked out. So hopefully it'll be good.
Thank you. Thank you. You're a security engineer at Cruise working on securing driverless cars, working on automation there. But before we get into all of that, I want to get into the car hacking scene and your thoughts on where we are. But I want to, since I have you on the podcast, we got to spend some time going through your life and career. Okay. You were a math guy out of high school. How did you end up at the NSA? Were you recruited out of high school or out to some of those programs like Vinny and Chris Eng and some of those guys?
No, I was not a very good high school student, so I went to college like everyone else. I majored in math, went to grad school at Notre Dame, got a PhD, and then I had to decide if I wanted to basically teach math or do something else, and I didn't really want to teach math, so.
What are we talking about? 2000s? Early 2000s?
Yeah, I graduated in 2000. So NSA was a chance to go do something else. So I went there, and while I was there, it was a pretty cool program. They taught me the trade and learned how to do computer stuff.
What can you talk about the trade? What can you talk about what you did there? Anything at all?
Not too much.
How long did you?
I was there like 5 years. I basically took Dave Vitel's seat, so I was in basically the same area as he was.
And both of you have the same answer, which is I can't tell you anything about.
I mean, that stuff is so outdated. Anything I worked on is 20 years old, so no one cares anyway.
Got it. We got with the public, myself and security journalists and writers got introduced to you in 2007, I believe, through your paper. Let me get it right. The Legitimate Vulnerability Market Inside the Secretive World of O-Day Exploit Sales. 2007, seminal paper on that market and the existence of that market. Can you just go back and give me what was the motivation for writing it and what were you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, not a lot of journalists like yourself even covered that. It was like totally below the radar. But yeah, it was, at the time, people were, there was this, it's people know now that folks sell exploits and
You had just left the NSA, right?
This was it was like two years later. I left in 2005, I think. So okay. It had been a little bit of time. I had been doing some research and stuff. And I guess I just kept hearing people talk about, whether, are people selling exploits? Is this a thing? And, I wanted to kind of lay out as, that was my one shot at trying to be a journalist, I guess, was lay out the story as I knew it. If exploit sales were going on, I really took it from a researcher's perspective, like why is selling exploits hard? Why would you want to do it? What are some problems you'll run into and that sort of thing. And I presented it at some economics conference. So it's, it wasn't exactly like mainstream.
Right. But what the motivation was to just kind of shine some light on the existence of this market and more specifically, just how complicated and complex it was to navigate it from the researcher's perspective, getting a good price, finding the right buyers, making sure it's not burned before it's sold.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like nuanced in the sense that it's not like you're selling a car where you can just get it back or whatever. Like, what you're selling is basically a secret. And how do you prove that it's real without just giving it away? And where they're like, oh yeah, actually we didn't want that, but now we already have it, so we're not paying you. So it's just kind of interesting. I thought it was, at least from like, how do you try to navigate around that? And the short answer is it's just all trust based.
From then till now, and the question now is we're at 2022. This stuff has become so normalized that we have companies, we have offensive exploit creation companies selling. There's mercenary conversations around mercenary groups and so on. It's become rather mainstream. When you look back at 2007 and what you were trying to raise and where we are today and where exploit sales are what is your own take on how it's evolved?
I mean, almost all the research I did was this and lots of other stuff we can talk about was like weird and interesting and no one knew it at the time. And now everyone knows it. So like, I don't know if that is because just time moved on or what, but like you said, there's $1 million companies and lots of people that we know probably work for them. And, it's not a secret. It's just the way things work now. But back when I wrote the paper, no one really knew anything about it, and so I was just trying to shed some light on it, I guess.
Uh, are you surprised with where we are today, with exploit sales being a big key part of the ecosystem, or were you expecting it to kind of stay under the radar all these years? Because there's a little bit of controversy to it. There's a lot of controversial takes around selling these things to governments for use against dissidents and some other like non credible targets. When you look at where exploit sales is today, were you expecting we'd be here?
I don't know if I really thought that hard about it, but I'm not that
No.
surprised in the sense that like exploits are always going to be useful to people, whether they're bad guys, good guys, governments,
Right.
hackers, pen testers, whatever. And they've gotten progressively harder to make or write or discover, and there's value in that. And so I guess I'm not surprised people try to make money off of something that's hard to do.
How did you deal with some of the early controversy from your discussion of this? You remember Chris Shagoyan actually did a famous talk with your kitchen, photograph of your kitchen up there, and was very critical of you guys, suggesting that you were part of that section of the industry that was pushing exploits in the wrong places. Was that something that ever concerned you? Is that something you worried about navigating?
I mean, that particular individual never concerned me, but the idea is
No, in general.
So I mean, for me, it was always more of a freedom of speech, kind of freedom of expression kind of topic, more than people hunting dissidents or something. So it was like, I found a vulnerability, and I can do what I want with that information, and it's up to companies to secure their products. It's not my job to do that. I'm just some guy. And so that's the way
Right.
I always saw it. And so like I have the freedom to do what I want with this information was kind of, the way I saw it.
Right. And right after that, you became a thorn in Apple's side. Was that deliberate?
I mean, it certainly
Or was
wasn't
that
related
just
to
kind
it
of
wasn't
headline
related to
hunting?
that. It was I mean, basically the trying to think the way I got started in that. So like again, this is something that you won't believe now, but in the 2006 timeframe, there was a large group of people, like 80% of folks, even in our industry, who didn't believe that you could have malware on a Mac. Like it just was not like
Right.
it was impossible. They
Right.
thought.
Apple was leading, but Apple was leading with that messages. I'm a
Well,
Mac, you're a PC, PC's got the sniffles and so
right.
on. So they led their entire marketing program around that.
I know, but anyone with
Macs are
any
pretty hard.
knowledge at all should have known it was bullshit. So a part of my mission was just to educate again, like, hey, it's a computer. It's going to run code if you give it to it, and there's, they didn't figure out a magic bullet to write perfect software, and there's going to be vulnerabilities. And so a lot of my early like research and Mac stuff, and that was like kind of the early pwn to own things was,
Right.
like, hey, look, it's exploits do work against Macs, and the really hilarious thing is that after the first year I won pwn to own, hacking a MacBook, like if you read the
Yeah, you're going too fast because I want to go over
all
the
right, well, let me
phone to
just
own
finish this.
years
So,
as well.
so
But go
like
ahead.
the comments in that, if you read like Slashdot or something back then, are all about how they thought I was just like lying or making it up. Like even after I showed that you could do it, people didn't want to believe that you could actually exploit a Mac. And so it's just bizarre. And then like the second year, it was like more people kind of believed it. And then at some point, then it was kind of common knowledge that, wow, they're not perfectly safe computers. Who knew?
Right. The first time was in 2008, after Dino had done it the previous year. In addition to educating people, there was some serious cash on display there. Your first win in 2008 was a $10,000 cash for MacBook Air, includes the MacBook Air, the point-to-one component is it. What do you remember about that period of time? I believe it was a Safari bug you used.
Yeah, they were all the pwn wins I did were Safari bugs.
Or Safari bugs. Can you paint a picture for the audience about what cracking into a Mac look like at that time compared to today with those folks coming to Pwn to One trying to get into a
Well, for
Mac?
one thing, they sure win a lot more money today than I did. So you mentioned there's a lot of money, 10K. I'm not going to turn it down, but
Targets are
I mean,
harder
they
though.
make like 100K now. I mean,
But targets are harder. I mean, it's much, much more difficult than when you were. I mean, you admit that up front that like a lot of what you're seeing the kids doing at Pwn to One today is incredible work,
I mean,
right?
for sure. I mean, and part of that is if you look, like I did some of those at least by myself, where now it's teams of 10 people doing it. And that's just like, and it's not that I'm worth 10 people. I'm definitely not. It's that it's just that much harder. But yeah, like back then, like I can't remember the details. It's been 15 years, but like
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they didn't have depth for sure. They might not have had ASLR. I don't remember the details, but it was certainly much easier.
No
No, there was
sandbox.
zero sandboxing. That was a big change that happened, of course. So yeah, so it was easier for sure. But people weren't. I don't know if there weren't as many people in the field or what the deal was, but there wasn't, especially in 2008, there wasn't that much competition to who people who knew how to hack into Macs.
Do you think your work and the work of Dino and some of the guys going to Pwn to One every year actually forced Apple into? How much credit do you give to Pwn to One for dragging Apple along and adding those mitigations, adding those roadblocks to where we are today, where it's a lot more difficult to show up at Pwn to One with a single vulnerability and a single exploit and pop the entire machine,
Yeah,
right?
you need
You need
chains for
chains.
sure. Like the thing about Pondon that's interesting is, yes, you can sit here and say it's gotten harder, and it has, I think. But if you look at like the data of Pondon, every year someone does it. So,
Right.
if you're looking at the binary data of can a computer get hacked at Pondon, the answer has been yes for 20 years, and that hasn't ever changed. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that it's hard to measure how much harder it is when that is and maybe you can use the money in Pondon as a measurement of some kind. But
Right.
if you measure based on success, then there's been no progress. But back to your original question about how much impact.
But that's not fair. But that's not fair though that there's been no change if you measure it based on success because it's a okay. Let's get into that little portion there. If it's so much harder that it requires teams and chains and the prices are so much higher, why is it still successful?
Well, it's possible, of course, and so I mean, whether today or in 10 years, you're going to be able to hack into a computer and a web browser. So it's possible. And then why do people do it? I guess, for the prize money, for the fame, for their resume. I don't know. So I mean, as long as you hang that carrot out there, people are going to go for it, and it's
Right.
possible. So they're going to succeed most of the time, and so far, all the time.
Right. And as an industry, you guys, the experts, said stop looking for bugs and stop focusing on bugs and try to limit exploitation, try to reduce exposure to exploitation, reduce attack surfaces here and there. Do you think that as an industry from 2007, 8, 9, those years to today, we've moved in the direction we needed to move with the right set of mitigations and the right set of investments in security, or would you have preferred we had gone in certain different directions? How do you look at the evolution of security on platforms, not only Apple but Windows and so on, and based on your previous advice that we should be focusing on limiting the power of
Yeah, it's
exploits?
funny you say that. So for a while, I believed the opposite. So I was a big proponent of find all the bugs, and then at some
Right.
point, I changed my mind. So like at some point, I realized that yeah, this you can find a lot of the bugs, but you're never gonna find all the bugs. And I think I underestimated how many vulnerabilities there are in software. And once I kind of got a better handle on that, I was like, oh, this is not a solution. So yeah, so
And that's still the most realistic approach to it,
yeah,
right?
I mean, you're not going to write perfect software, period. So what you have to worry about then is, like you mentioned, so minimizing attack surface. So you can eliminate huge classes of bugs or huge groups of bugs by not even having the code in your product anymore. Of course, you still need a web browser. It still needs to parse images and videos and stuff. So you can never eliminate
Right.
everything, but you can do that. And then you try to make okay. Then you say this browser or this piece of software is going to get exploited. Then what? Like, I don't want to lose everything then. So then you make it to where, like, Chrome, I don't know, I haven't kept up on this in a while, but for a while, Chrome had a sandbox that said you could read files, but you couldn't write files. And so, like, okay, well, then you could read stuff, but you're not going to really be able to persist because you can't write any files. And so you use sandboxes, you make things hard. You hopefully have some detection in there to where, like, okay, I give up. You're going to attack me someday and succeed, but I'm going to know it. and then I'm going to be able to do something about it. And so that's kind of the kind of holistic approach I think you need to take, because just saying like I'm going to find all the bugs is not really a sane solution.
And on the reduction of right, and on the reduction of attack surface space, we've got a most recent example is lockdown mode. Have you gotten a chance to play with it? What are your thoughts on what lockdown mode?
I'm a bad practitioner of security, so I like security is a trade off between things are easy and work and things that are secure. And in my personal life, I just choose to make things work. Life's hard enough without my computer not being able to do stuff.
So you haven't looked at lockdown mode at all? Do you expect it to be game changing though, just from a technical perspective with the kind of attack surface reduction that is done? Do you expect success from that to address what it's meant to address?
What's success? So if your customer of lockdown mode is the president of the United States or a CEO of some high tech company, then no, you're still going to be able to attack those guys. And if your customer is me, just some guy, then you probably don't need it, because my iPhone's pretty secure unless you're one of these few people who can spend 6 months working on an exploit, and why are you going to waste it on me? So like I don't really get what it's supposed to solve. It doesn't make your phone 100% secure, that's for sure. And my phone's
right, and it's meant to address targets from those adversaries that are fully well resourced. I mean, it's NSO and Pegasus and those types of guys. Do you think that when you say the victims of those guys are still going to be popped, you're saying lockdown mode, you're not expecting lockdown mode to have a significant effect on that?
I mean, it's going to cost them more money and resources, but I don't think they're going to be like, we can't hack that. It's impossible. So like I think it might cost them a little more money to do it, but I have no, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable having that and that mode and expecting not to get hacked and putting my life on the line, and having that be the only defense that I'm counting on. I don't think that I wouldn't count on that for sure.
Just to close the loop on the Apple thing, how would you rate the security posture of the MacBook and the iPhone today?
I mean, it's a hell of a lot better than 10 years ago. No, it's pretty good. Like,
and you're still
I still use. I mean, I'm talking to you on a Mac right now. I have an iPhone in my pocket, so I still use it. I've used it forever. I think they're pretty good. You mentioned Pondone earlier. I did it 4 years, and eventually I stopped doing it because it was too hard. So, and that was a long time ago, right? That was 2012. That's 10 years ago. It was too hard for me. So,
when did it become too hard?
Then.
Or what made it too hard?
It's gotten harder since then, even. But at the time, it was like, fewer vulnerabilities. They reduced their attack surface. They have ASL or DEP. So, and at some point, I'm sure they had sandboxing or whatever. That was, past my days. But I don't really. For me, it's not fun to work in a group of 10 people, hacking a thing. It's fun to like work with like a buddy or by yourself or whatever. But once you got 10 people, it's a job. It's not a hobby.
Right. It's not fun anymore. And at some point, the dynamics change where from, like we just mentioned, from one vulnerability and one exploit, it went to you needed 3 or 4 vulnerabilities to get root and do additional
You need things. Information disclosure bugs, which I suck at finding. And so like there was just things that were kind of, I did it. It was never my job. I never really made any money on it. And so it was just something that I would do in my spare time. And it got to the point that it wasn't fun enough to do in my spare time.
And then you pivoted to mobile, and you might have the distinction for all we know of being the only security researcher to be banned from both app stores. Could you talk a little bit about the Apple work and the Android work that caused that?
Sure. So my humble brag is I was the first one to hack an iPhone, first one to hack an Android phone when they came out a million years ago. But what you're talking about is for the iPhone, the way iPhones work is they have code signing, and that's what makes it to where you can only download apps from the App Store and not just from some random website. And that's one of the things that makes it really secure, is and secure in the sense that you're not going to have like malware running crazy on your phone because it had to go through the App Store. And part of going through the App Store is Apple reviews it before they put it there. So like if it was doing something super bad, they wouldn't put it there. Anyway, I found a flaw like a while ago. Hopefully you know the year. I don't. Where
2011.
There you go.
iPhone and iPad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I found a flaw where you could have an app that could download code that hadn't been signed and hadn't been checked by Apple and run it. So that violates their basic security principle around code signing. And of course, I was going to report this to Apple because I always report all my bugs to Apple, and Apple never pays me or anything like that. I never have gotten a bug bounty from them. I just did it for fun. And one of the things I knew was going to happen, because at this point, Apple already knew who I was pretty well because I'd reported a bunch of bugs to them in the past.
But you had created an app to demo a harmless app. I think it was like stock quotes or something. It was like it allowed you to manipulate some data.
So the deal was, I was afraid that if I reported to them the bug that there's this code signing flaw and that you could have in an app, that they would say, "Oh, well, if you submitted that, we would have caught it. So there's no way that vulnerability would ever be exposed in the real world." And so, in a preemptive move, I created an app that did take advantage of that vulnerability, only if I made it so, if some random guy downloaded my app, it wouldn't do it. I had to trigger it. And so anyway, and I put the app in through the App Store review process. It passed. So it was in the App Store for like months, and then I reported the bug to them, and they fixed it. But they got mad. So like the story is, I was out like jogging one day. I came home and my wife's like, "Oh, Apple called you." And I was like, Apple doesn't call me. Never in my life. It's not like a common thing for a multi-billion-dollar corporation to give you a ring. So I knew something was up. And it turned out that was the day that the like news report or whatever had come out about this bug in the app and all that stuff. And so anyway, they were mad about the app being in the App Store because it had this security critical vulnerability in it or whatever. And so they and to punish me, I guess, they told me I couldn't. They kicked me out of the developer program for a year, for at least a year, they said. So then I couldn't write apps anymore. The only reason it kind of affected me a little bit was I couldn't before that I could download as part of that program like beta releases of Apple OSs, so I could check out my exploits were working or not, or if they had fixed them. So that was kind of a bummer, but. Anyway, I contacted them after a year and I was like, "Hey, it's been a year. Like, can I get back in this program?" And they just didn't respond to email. So as far as I know, I'm still.
So you assume you've been banned for life.
I don't know. And then
And then
go ahead.
The Android App Store. You also had an incident with the Android App Store. What caused that?
Yeah, that one was me and John Override did some research into their thing called Bouncer. I don't know if they still have this thing, but. It was the way, again, they have a review process for apps you develop. But I guess they do it all, or at least a big part of theirs was automatic. So you would take an app, they would run it in an emulator, make sure that it didn't do anything too crazy. And if it was fine, they would put it in the store. And so we were doing some research on how that thing works and how you could fingerprint that. So how could your app act nicely when it's an emulator and then on a real phone, be malicious or whatever. But they ended up the super crazy thing about this was I never published an app ever with them because you could just put it up there, they would review it, and then you had to hit publish. And I just never published one, and so they kicked me out because I never published one, but John had published some, and he got kicked out because of that. Then they kicked me out because my account was associated with his account. And so I was like, this is so absurd. And then I was like, but at the same time, if I'm associated with John, I'm probably pretty dirty, so it's probably fine to kick me out. So yeah, they kicked me out, and they straight up said it was a lifetime ban. So I will never be able to make a career writing apps. They've made sure of that.
In either of the two app stores,
unless Nokia comes back or something, I'm pretty much out of luck.
In your research years, what would you say? And I've asked you this during the Point-to-One years, but I'm looking at it from a more wider lens. What do you say you're better at? Finding vulnerabilities and fuzzing and looking for crashes and finding exploitable paths, or writing exploits?
Yeah, that's an easy question.
The flip side to that is, which is easier and which is harder?
As far as easier or harder, I think it depends on the person. But for me, I'm 100% better at finding bugs. I can find bugs. I like finding bugs. It's interesting to me. Writing exploits is just something I do just to prove that bugs are real. I don't like it. But it's sort of part of the job or whatever. So, I'm good at finding bugs. I think I've liked finding bugs, since I was, NSA.
What makes you good? What makes someone good at finding bugs? Is there a mental approach? Is there a luck component to it? Is there a framework that works for everyone?
Yeah, I will say the reason I like it is it's it's usually like it's really hard and there's tons of code and all this. But at the end, it usually boils down to like 2 lines. And you're like, look how stupid they were. They made this mistake, right? That's the thing I think is so fun about it. Is it looks easy.
Right.
It's like magic. It looks easy. I mean, but it's hard, right? And so anyway, but as far as what it takes to be good at it, like for one thing, you have to be patient and not give up. So you're probably not going to find a bug in a
Right.
day or a week sometimes, and like I've looked for weeks without finding any bugs, and that's just part of it. And people ask if I use math, my PhD in math ever. No is the answer to that.
Yeah.
Except working 3 years on a math problem teaches you that you can't solve everything in a day, and I think I kind of use that there. But no, I think a big part of finding bugs is looking in the right place. So look at code that is either like super brand new or super old that nobody uses but is still there. And a lot of my success has been, especially recently or more recently, is in like newer type products. So it's like, oh, these, like I'm not looking at core Windows for bugs because they've
Right.
that's been audited by 1 billion people. So it's like, oh, like if we want to talk about cars or batteries or whatever, like no one probably looked at this in a long time or ever. And so yeah, so I've always trying to look at something that's easier.
You're more likely to have implementation errors there and some other things that pop up bugs, right? Dino also talks about blood in the water. Is that an approach you take where you know that this component of code has always been problematic and you're more likely to find something
Yeah,
there?
that's an approach for sure. That's like kind of the opposite of what I do. I try to look where no one else is looking. So yeah, there's different ways and different people find different bugs. And, even when I was a consultant or at my day job now, like I never look for bugs by myself, like, cause it's just, there's some bugs I'm going to find and there's some that due to whatever biases I have or whatever, I'm never going to find. And
Right.
so it always takes more than one set of eyes, I think, if you want to know what's going on.
I asked this of Nico Wiseman and some of your peers in the exploit writing world, and it's something that's just, fascinating and interesting to me. Maybe it'll bore the audience, but what does it feel like emotionally when you've popped a piece of software and you get your exploit to run super cleanly? Is that something you're clicking and running it over and over just for the thrill of it? Like, what does that feel like? What does that feel like at the visceral level, finding and realizing that you have this kind
It
of
feels
power?
good, but at the same time, like it's like days, or at least for me, because I'm slow. It's days of like knowing this is going to work, and then it finally does. So it's like it's like relief. Like finally, that thing worked. I knew it was going to work. It just finally did. So like people wonder like was I excited when I hacked the Jeep the first time? It's like yes, except it was like months of micro progress, and so it was like
Right.
that final day was step 1000.
Relief more
Right.
than
I had
thrill,
already
right?
done 999 steps and that was step 1,000. So like, yeah, it was cool, but I'd known for months it was going to work. It was just a matter of like, trudging down the trail until I got there. That's how a lot of it is
Right.
like writing exploits is for me.
I feel like we're rushing through all of your your history,
Yeah,
your
man, stop
accomplishments.
downplaying
Because there
all
was
my
the
cool stuff.
SMS.
I was hacking stuff all day, man. You're not giving me no credit.
No, there was the work with Colin Moliner in 2009 around the SMS processing bug, which I believe you tested on an iPhone of mine that I
Oh
still
yeah.
have, the old original iPhone of mine that I
Yeah,
still
Colin's my
have.
coworker now. I still hang
Um,
out with him, and yeah. So that one,
Absolutely.
it was you could send a text message and take over an iPhone, which no one had done at that
Yeah,
point. Now it's like
yeah.
with Natalie and stuff, like they're finding all sorts of bugs in SMS parsers.
Right. That was the original zero click, right? The original zero click. You sent me an SMS. I clicked on a link, and you had my contact database on your machine. It was like mind eye opening to me at the
Yeah,
time.
I mean it was magic, right? So you could all I needed was your phone number. I didn't need you to click anything, so that was nice. Didn't even need
Right.
to know your email or nothing. So I could send you a text message on your iPhone and take it over, which was like a pretty cool, but pretty
How
cool.
did you how did you choose your targets? Because I feel like there's a little bit of the media game you were playing as well, going after those things that were going to, create headlines, drum up publicity. You talked about educating the audience and so on. Because you did battery hacking as
Hmm.
well. I think there was another one that I'm forgetting. You did the Apple battery hack. NFC stuff, before the car
Yeah.
stuff? How did you pick your
I mean, the
targets?
NFC thing was interesting too. But yeah, I was like, just stuff that interests me. So like, I did basically web browsers forever because that's kind of the
Right.
most, ripe for the picking. But then I was like, I got sick of that, and I was like, what kind of things can I attack that are not that are that are different or unique in some way? And I was like, oh, it'd be cool if you could send a text message and hack a phone. And so that's what I did.
Right.
And
So just the intellectual curiosity and just the fascination with trying to
yeah,
being able
yeah,
to do
back in
that.
that time is when I hacked Second Life too, which was like,
Ah,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right, right. Talk to me. Remember, I remember that was a fun
yeah, that was
exploit
a
as
good one.
well.
So that, I mean, for people who don't are too young to know what Second Life is, it was like this thing that like Facebook's metaverse or whatever they're trying to
Meta.
do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you could. I worked with Dino on this one too. So you could create an object in Second Life, just like it was, and in this case, it was like a box. And if your
Right.
like avatar got too close to the box, I would take over your avatar and your computer. And so it was sort
Right.
of interesting that, like, to me, that was interesting because it's like, oh, it's like a physical, you know, creation. Right. It's
Proximity
a
type.
creation
Yeah.
in the real world, in the, quote, virtual world of the exploit. Like the exploit was a thing. And yeah, that was zero click too. You just walk by it and it would exploit you. And then you didn't, for a long time, I thought you had to like see the box. But it turned out the box, like your computer doesn't have eyeballs, so like you could just bury the box
Right. Right.
underground, and if you still walked over it, the computer processed it, and you would exploit you. So very interesting stuff, I thought.
Didn't it? Didn't the demo include some audio file? I don't know. Maybe my memory is fading, but I remember the demo of that exploit might have had some fun
There was
component to it.
one. I mean, you might be talking about this. So back then, apparently, I was braver than I am now. I was doing. Me and Dino were giving a talk at ShmooCon, and we were demoing the exploit live in front of everybody in Second Life. And at the time, I had, of course, we had reported the bug to Linden Labs, was the name of the company.
Right. Right.
But it's a virtual world. Anyone can show up virtually if they want to. And some Linden Labs employee showed up with like a little protest picket sign that was walking around while we were doing the demo. I was like, this is so wild. I was like, I guess we'll still just do it anyway, even though there's a guy, protesting the exploit, but, fix it if you don't want us to live demo our exploit.
Just going back to that time, I'm closing the loop on it. There was a famous picture of Alex Sadirov and Dino Daizovi on stage at CanSec West with the cardboard "No More Free Bugs" sign. You were part of that. I won't call it a movement, but you were part of that group of guys at the time who were objecting to giving just finding bugs and giving it to vendors who were not only sleeping on them and taking a long time to patch them, but and would blame researchers for irresponsible disclosure and all those stuff. What was the motivation for No More Free Bugs, and what was the idea there, and how has it evolved to today with what we are seeing around bug bounty programs and all
Man,
that
anyone
stuff?
who listens to this is gonna have no idea. We're skipping all over the place. It's crazy. Yeah,
Right,
so No More Free Bugs was something that me, Alex, and Dino came up with at CanSec West. They're famous for holding the sign. I was actually on stage talking about it, doing the intellectual
uh,
power work while they're just standing there. But yeah, the idea was, like, I've reported tens of bugs, maybe 100 bugs to companies over my career, and they hadn't given me anything. So we're working really hard and the results is that the products are being more secure, and companies weren't, and sometimes companies, not only were they not giving us anything, they were downright hostile about it.
openly
Right. And
hostile, right?
so the idea was just like, hey, it'd be nice to have some rules in place of how we report bugs, and maybe make some money off it, since you pay the same person working for you to try to find these bugs, but when I'm don't work for you, you don't pay me anything. And so the idea was just like,
Right.
well, maybe we can hold these companies accountable for the way they interact with researchers by not providing bugs anymore. It's like, until you figure out a way to compensate us for this work, we won't give you any more bugs. So that was No More Free Bugs. And we did that for a while, for months, I guess. There was a bunch of people, who were participating in
Right.
that, and it didn't work. So
Right. This was but this was pre bug bounty platforms.
yeah,
Before
there were basically,
there were iDefense, VeriSign, There were a few, but
Yeah.
it was before the booming of the bug bounty
Yeah, there weren't
platformism.
really any bug bounty platforms then, and so yeah, I mean, in some sense, I mean, first of all, I'm not going to take any credit for the way the industry moves. I'm just
People paying
right.
for
No,
bugs.
I didn't, the industry moves. I'm a drop in the ocean or the river, I guess is a better analogy. So yeah, maybe I moved it in a millimeter, but
But it was an important piece of the conversation at the time. The whole notion of vendors taking advantage of security researchers and
yeah,
the value of vulnerabilities, making products a lot better and making products a lot more expensive, and you guys were not being properly compensated for it. It was an important part of the just a general conversation
it
at the
got
time.
people talking about it. There was news stories. Maybe there were people like companies who thought about it, but I like to say,
Well,
for
listen,
9 months we didn't report any
immediately after
bugs,
that,
and companies, instead of coming begging for more bugs, were thrilled because they didn't have any security advisories during that time. So they're
right,
like, everyone from the outside thought that they were finally secure, and it's like the
right,
exact
but
opposite of what really happened, which is hilarious to me.
and right after that, Google started buying bugs. Google started, coming to Point to One as a sponsor and running their own Chrome Point to One program. So at least in practice, the No More Free Bugs movement did resonate, and we started to see vendors starting to pay for
Yeah, I mean,
things.
there are certainly bug bounties now in a lot of companies, and another thing that we really wanted, and one of the things bug bounties does provide, like formal bug bounties, is just rules of engagement. So it says like,
Right,
here's the rules. You can submit a bug, and we won't prosecute you. We won't do anything. Here's the kind of bugs. Here's what you can do, and we're okay with it. Here's what you can't do, and we'll be mad at you. And that's really a big part of it too. It's
right,
just
right,
like,
right.
how can I know I can report this bug without getting in trouble? And so that's a big part of bug bounties that is a nice benefit. Even if the money's not enough, like I couldn't live off of my bug bounty fines, but at least I know that I'm not going to go to jail, and that's something.
And then in 2014, you pivoted to cars.
2000
Well,
earlier than that, I think.
2014 is when
Yeah.
when the work became publicly known. What was the idea? Why automobiles?
Well, it was interesting. like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool that, I had, like I mentioned before, I like to write exploits. I like to find bugs. I like to know how things work. And there's nothing that's computerized that's bigger than a car that I own, right? I don't own a satellite or a
Right.
tank or anything. The biggest computer I own is in my car. And it's also like, back to like the Second Life and the SMS thing. It's like, I like to be able to show, like, I like to pretend like, hey, if I'm talking to my grandma and she wants to know what I do, I need a way to explain that to her, and say like,
Demonstrate.
oh, I
Right.
hack web browsers and I can read your mail. It's kind of like she doesn't really know what the hell I'm talking about. But
Right.
if
Right.
I say like, hey, when you here's a video of Andy Greenberg driving down the road and I can turn a steering wheel, like, she's like terrified by that, and at least she can understand what that is. So
Right.
so for me, it was appealing because you could physically demonstrate it. It had safety implications, so it was hopefully helping people be safer. It was, I thought it'd be pretty easy because no one had probably really looked at it. Maybe one group had, but like in my particular chosen car, probably no one had ever looked at it outside of whoever worked there. And so I thought
What
it
did
wouldn't be too hard to find a bug.
you mentioned one? Yeah, you mentioned one other person there was some. Uh, what was the car hacking scene at the time? Were you guys pioneering this, or were you trying to piggyback on some prior
Yeah,
work
so
around,
around the
ability to?
time frame of like 2012, there was some academic group that was working on this, and they hacked an Impala. They were able to remotely hack into the car from anywhere, and they could control the brakes. And so that was kind of, and they had two papers. One that was kind of like our first paper, which was just only like if you were internal to the car, and then a second one that showed different ways you could wirelessly attack the car. And their papers were great, super thorough. And that's what we based all our research on. At the time, that was the only paper about it. So there's still not
Right.
that many papers about it. But yeah, so I read that paper probably 20 times, both those papers. And those people did, like, I might have never, I heard about it through someone talking about their paper. So if that paper didn't exist, we may have never done any research, because it's such a novel idea to even think you could hack a car. Like, I don't think I could have come up with that on my own. So
Right.
read the paper, it was great. And then that gave us the idea. It's like, hey, we should get into this. It's kind of cool. And some of the things we did, like, they basically did everything, like no click, remote car, control it, right? So they did end to end everything you could do. So some of the things we wanted to do, that was a little bit different than that. Me and Chris Valsek was, for one thing, we were going to be more open. So they were very scared to release anything for fear that someone would do something bad with it. But the bad thing about that is like, it was really hard for folks like me to learn like how to do anything. So we wanted to release all our tools, be very, very transparent. The other thing is the cars had come along a long way from the 2010 car, whatever they were looking at. So they could do brakes. They could have probably done a lot more, but their car just couldn't do a lot more. So we made sure to take a car that had all the advanced features we could find. So it had lane keep assist, auto parking, so it could parallel park for you. It had the adaptive cruise control. So anyway, so there was a lot more computerized components, so we could do a lot more physically with the car. So that was the other kind of thing that made our paper.
A lot more attack surfaces everywhere that we just discussed. This was just addition. All of those became addition of attack surfaces and new areas for you guys to go plant the code, right? This led to a massive recall. What was could talk a little bit about the outcome from this, and what was the research? So many questions around this Jeep research, because to do this kind of research, you actually have to go buy a vehicle. So there's a big, giant cost attached to even attempting this research. Can you talk about what was that cost like? Not just a monetary cost, but the cost of trying to put together this entire thing from scratch.
Yeah, so we were lucky, Chris and I. We did 2 different car hacking researches. The first one was I had a Ford, Chris had a Infiniti or something, I can't remember. He had a Toyota. Sorry.
This was prior to the Jeep
war.
War.
This was in around 2013, and that research was funded by DARPA through Mudge's Cyber Fast Track grant. So that didn't actually cost us anything. We were able to get the cars, buy a bunch of tools. And the reason buying the tools was expensive was no one really talked about how to do it. So we didn't know what tools would work. So I'd have to buy 5 different things and hope one of them worked and stuff. So it was expensive. For me, it wasn't, because DARPA paid for everything. So that was nice. When the Jeep came around, we needed a Jeep. Chris worked for a consulting company at the time. They bought us the Jeep. So it didn't cost me anything besides time and, I would wreck it. So I wrecked the Jeep with, when we were doing some of the videos, I had to pay to get a new radar put on it or something. I just paid out of pocket for that. And then with the Ford, one time I crashed into my garage on accident when I was hacking on it, and had to pay to get that fixed. So there are other things that you have to pay for besides just the car itself. But yeah.
The Jeep research was incredible because it affected braking, steering, acceleration. There's the famous video of the Wired video of you, Andy Greenberg, the journalist, driving in the car, and you guys controlling it remotely from a location far away from a laptop, and messing with him on the highway. You were criticized for that being a stunt hacking thing that put Andy in danger and all that stuff. Was there any worries at all? On liability and all of that stuff?
So the reason we did that, first, let me say, is like we mentioned, the academic folks had already done basically the same thing, but they did it on a test track. Guys wearing a race car helmet and stuff, and you didn't really hear about it. I didn't hear about it at the time when they did the research, and I was a hacker dude, right? And so we wanted to really make it relatable. You're on a regular road, you're in a regular car, you're next to other cars. It's so that was a big part of it, was we wanted to make it to where people could associate oh, I get it. That's bad. That could happen to me. It's not just on some test track or something. And so there was some concern with it, but we tried to consider we could have turned the steering wheel or disengaged his brakes. I thought we kept it pretty safe. All we did was kill his engine, which happens to, I grew up with a pretty crappy car. It broke down all the time. And so it's a pretty daily occurrence.
A dead engine on the road
exactly.
Is not a big deal.
So that was, we tried to do something that demonstrated it, but still kept it as safe as we could. And Andy knew it was. It's not like Andy was victimless. He knew we were going to do it, so he had to know. Hopefully be prepared. And the main thing, if you watch the video, is I keep telling them just don't panic. Right, that's the main thing. As long as you keep your cool, it's going to be fine. But if you start freaking out, then something bad could happen. So that was the main message I tried to get to him.
And this actually was this live demo not responsible, but was this live demo necessary for Jeep to take it seriously? What was the disclosure process with working with Jeep to get these issues
Yeah,
reported
we
to them?
reported these vulnerabilities to Fiat Chrysler something like 7 months before Black Hat. We told them like, "Hey, we're going to talk about it at Black Hat. Here's the deal." And we reported it to them before we even knew the full effects. Like we just knew that there was a vulnerability that let us do something. And so as time went on, we kept reporting more information to them about like when we found more stuff. But the and whether it was necessary to get it fixed, and who knows. But the one thing I will say is the day, so they had known for 7 months, and they did the recall like 2 days after the Andy Greenberg story came out. So maybe they were always
Right.
planning on doing that, but I tend to think that definitely got some attention to them to move a little faster. I mean, that's the
Car
who knows.
security and
That's always it's always a debate how you report things. We just tried to give as much time as possible to people and let them to do the right thing.
has things gotten better in the car security work the car security work, not necessarily on affecting braking, steering, acceleration, and all of that stuff, but in general, did your work change things around how things were designed? Did your work change things around how companies try to mitigate those things? What was the outcome outside of the recall? I mean, recall and that individual fix. Were there any structural things that was done?
I mean, it's hard to tell.
And not only for Jeep, but
Yeah, I mean,
generally.
so it's tough because the automotive industry is pretty secretive. So, like Apple, which was secretive for years, now they write white
Hmm.
papers on security. But you're not going to see, a Ford white paper on how they secure their ECUs. Like, just that's not really the culture of the auto industry. So it's pretty tough to tell what changes have been made. I hope that tons have. I know from just talking to at conferences, engineers from different car companies will come to me and say, "Oh, thanks for doing that research. Like that really got us more resources, or we were able to hire, or whatever." So like
Right.
anecdotally, yes. If you look at like real data, like you can see some changes. So like the Jeep we hacked was a 2014 Jeep Cherokee. Sometime around 2018, they added in a new ECU to that line of cars that acted like a gateway or a firewall, which would have made our attack like way harder.
Right.
So like that stuff you can see from the outside, but like on the inside, like how they actually do things, it's really hard to tell. I hope that it's better. They've had plenty of time to do it by now.
Do you worry that this cost that we talked about, if you want to do car hacking research, you have to go purchase a vehicle, or you have to have access to a vehicle, or get someone to purchase it for you. Do you worry that just this prohibitive cost of doing this research has limited the ability of researchers who may have the ability to do it but just can't do it, and we're kind of way behind because of this cost?
I mean, it's a concern, I guess, but I hope that the entire car industry isn't only secure because researchers aren't looking. Like, I hope that like
Right, but it's been proven. It's been proven that third-party research drives a lot of this. I mean, we just had a one-hour discussion of how all the work you guys did went into mitigations on Windows and Mac platforms. You would have to believe that a lot of public research, public publications would put some pressure on these guys. And if there aren't more teams, like how many folks are doing public research on car hacking nowadays? Team Keen and maybe two
yeah,
others,
not
right?
many people, unfortunately.
Shouldn't that be 25 teams based on the talent that we have in
I mean,
this?
I think maybe you're giving security researchers too much credit. So, like, what made Apple or Microsoft or whoever change? Was it Pwn to own, or was it actual malware that was costing their customers money? And so like maybe the reason you don't see a ton of car security research is because cars aren't getting hacked, and so like there's not a
Right.
so like it,
And I'm arguing that cars aren't getting hacked because guys don't have the ability or the
I
resources
mean,
to
like
go
guys like me,
look at
I'm
this
saying
stuff.
hacked in like a malicious way. So like you
All
don't
right,
see
right.
cars
Okay.
getting crashed every day because of cyber attacks. And if you did, then maybe there'd be more researchers willing to pay the money to get a car to do the research. But because it's like, well, it's like this thing that's not even happening, maybe that is as much a detriment as the cost.
Does your philosophy change? Is your security philosophy change as you go to automobiles and cars? From Let me just frame it this way: on Windows, Microsoft has adopted this assume breach as a philosophy. You assume breach and you do detection and response. I'm guessing that in the car world, you can't really assume breach and deal with detection and response because the dangers associated with an actual breach or an actual compromise would be much higher. How does your thinking how do you manage your thinking around just like a philosophy of protecting this car?
Well, you're wrong, Ryan. So you can do
Okay,
it. So like
fair
right. So
enough.
like think about the GPAC. So we attacked the head unit, and then we attacked
Mhm.
the like CAN controller, and then we were able to send messages to the brakes. If when we attacked the head unit that was detected and you shut off the head unit, then you win, right? Or you like disable the CAN traffic. You put the car in a safe mode or something. So there's definitely like it's going to be a chain of attacks even against a car, and if you can stop that
Right,
chain before it reaches the end, I always said like if all I could do is hack a car and change the radio station, that's a win because like who
right,
cares, right? It's bad, but it's not like turning the steering wheel bad. So there is a
right,
time
right.
between the ability to turn the radio station and the ability to control the steering where you can do detection and response. And so that is, I mean, it's not the only thing you want to be doing, but it's certainly a important thing that car companies can do to make security better for their vehicles.
I want to use the Tesla as an example because if you buy a Tesla 3 years ago, today it's a better car because of software updates coming down the pike, right? And every time a software update comes, you click accept and you run it, kind of just trusting these updates entirely. How worried should I be when I hit that apply this update around the ability of someone to push a malicious update to my car to do dangerous things? Not necessarily Tesla, but cars in general. How difficult it is to do what you guys did with your braking, steering, acceleration, and all of that stuff.
I wouldn't be too worried. I mean, Tesla uses code signing and stuff. So what's coming down to you was approved by someone who has a key at Tesla, which probably isn't that many people. Um, if
And that I mean that can be bypassed and
I
compromised.
mean, we've seen in the past that it's possible to get around these kinds of things. It's pretty rare. Like if you think about the whole world of exploits, very few have been through Microsoft Updater or something, right? Like that. I mean, I think it's happened, but if you compare this to the number of edge exploits, like it's minuscule. So it's hard to it's hard to mess that up, and it's hard to exploit that. So it's get updating things securely is something that is pretty doable. It's not
But that's the way remote exploits will be distributed if they're to be distributed, right? Through those firmware updating
maybe
mechanisms.
I don't know. Like I could like we could have attacked all the cars that were vulnerable. Like the Jeep was vulnerable just through a cell phone interface. So like that we wouldn't have done that through secure updates. We would have just attacked them all. I mean, maybe
Right,
you could count our malware as an update, but I mean,
right.
so yes, there's you can attack cars directly, or you can attack them through their infrastructure, and you're describing kind of an infrastructure style attack. But there's other ways you could do that. But it's you're when you buy a Tesla, you're signing up for a software car, right? And so
Right,
you,
right,
you
right.
probably just like anything else, you probably want those features because there's new better features coming down the pipe there, and you could just turn that off probably. I don't know if you can, but
Right,
if you're the person who buys a Tesla, you probably don't want to turn that off because the reason you buy a Tesla is you
right.
like this new cool features and all the like cool auto updates and stuff. And so, uh, you know,
So Cruise has a driverless fleet of cars out there, and you guys are pushing updates to it. How do you make sure the car isn't calling for somewhere else for a malicious update one, or how do you make sure there isn't the ability for someone to push it? Is there anything you can talk about how you guys
yeah, I
address
mean,
that?
we just do what you would do on any device. So like almost all the car security is really just security, best security standards for anything else, right? So we use TLS and we check the certificate so we know we're talking to the right thing. And then the updates we download are signed and we have we can check the signature before we install it. And, we just the same sorts of, I'm not inventing new security, on a daily basis. I'm
The same
yeah, I'm using the same
mitigations, yeah.
technologies that everyone else uses. I just make sure we do it right and, trying to not to make any mistakes.
Your buddy Chris Velasic is not here, but I want to put him on the spot because I suppose you guys talk every day.
Yep.
He said in automotive cybersecurity in 2022 is akin to where software security was around the time of the Bill Gates trustworthy computing memo. That sounds to me scary. It's like how I don't want to ask you to tell me what was he talking about, but is there a fear that automakers today are still back in the early 2000s as it relates to security?
I think probably a better analogy would be that, Chris and I were the Bill Gates trustworthy security memo when we hacked the Jeep. So that was like the eye-opening event for car companies, I hope. And that is the thing that hopefully set them down the path to, putting the proper resources into securing their vehicles. So that's where I think we are today is if you want to say like 2015 was like whenever this, 2003 when Bill Gates or whoever did this, then I would say, yeah. But I hope by now we're, and to Bill Gates' credit, like that worked, right? That improved security greatly. Like the computer couldn't stay up for 5 seconds without getting hacked back before that. And so that was a big instigator in improving the security of the entire industry. And I don't want to take too much credit, but hopefully something similar happened when we did the car attack against the Jeep.
I'm running out of time, so I'll throw one last question to you. If you could throw out to security research community areas in automotive research that's ripe for eyeballs, like where would you point them? Like what intellectually, what are you more curious about pursuing as it relates to automotive?
I think people should be looking at gateway modules of cars. And so a lot of the architectural security of cars relies on this gateway module, which separates things that talk to the internet from things that control the steering, right? And so a lot of the, at least high level security is built on this module that can stop traffic from transversing that way. And so, for example, like Tesla is literally the only one that has any research on it because that's who Keen Team likes to pick on.
Right.
And so there were some attacks early on, 2 years in a row, they were able to successfully bypass this gateway module and then control things like the brakes. And then at some point they stopped being able to do that. So now if you watch some of their more recent research is they get remote code running and then they don't ever get to the brakes. So they did that for the BMW i3 or whatever it was. And so they were able, and then there was another one they did recently, the same thing. And so in both of those cases, the gateway module was able to stop them from doing like the super scary stuff. And
but there's still some work.
Well, the car companies rely a lot on this module. Different companies have different modules, so you can't just look at one. And I think it would warrant spending time, someone looking at that. Like if you can find a bypass in that, it would be pretty impactful.
It's trouble. So there's attack surface and blood in the water.
Well, there's no blood in the water besides on the Tesla because no one looks at this stuff. But it's a really important piece of to the security puzzle. It does process data, so it would be a place that and like I mentioned, if Jeep would have had one of these, Chris and I probably wouldn't have been able to. There's a lot of things that like if they would have done X, Chris and I would not have been able to hack the Jeep, and this is one of those things.
Right. Let me let you out of here with this. Whenever I talk to people about driverless cars and the coming world of self-driving vehicles, the first thing that pops up is not me, safety, especially the layman. Like, I cannot trust this car to drive me. That mindset will probably change as we move forward. Today, would you recommend your mom getting into a driverless car and driving the streets of San Francisco? Is there a legitimate worry that there?
I mean, if you see my mom drive. No, so that's the thing is like everyone thinks they're a great driver, but I look around when I'm driving and a lot of people are terrible drivers. And so, I definitely wouldn't worry that she's going to be in a car that's going to get cyber attacked. I've been working, it's not perfect. There's, that could happen someday, but I've been working there 5 years and spent all that time making it hard. So it's going to be impressive exploit if it ever happens. I'll tell you that. Yeah, I think it's, the cars, self-driving cars are going to be safer than most drivers. And, they're going to, at least ours is going to be secure. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to take one. Plus, they're super cool.
I'll leave it right there. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thanks for having me. It's about time.
It's more than about time. Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Much.